Where are the papers? Show us the marriage certificate. Amanda's voice sliced through the warmth of our Christmas dinner, shattering the cheerful atmosphere. She stood at the head of the table, manicured nails digging into the polished mahogany surface, her eyes glinting with triumph. I bet you can't, because they don't exist. The room fell into a stunned silence. I set my fork down carefully, dabbing my napkin against my lips as 20 pairs of eyes turned toward me. Beside me, my husband, Michael, stiffened, his face paling. Across the table, my mother-in-law, Margaret, wore that thin, knowing smile, the one I come to despise over the last 5 years. "Amanda, that's enough," Michael began, but she waved him off. "No, Michael, we've all had enough. 5 years of watching her pretend to be part of this family. 5 years of lies. Show us the proof, Diana. Prove you're really married to my brother." I met her gaze steadily, then let my eyes sweep the room. Some of the family members looked horrified. Others, like Margaret, barely concealed their anticipation. I knew this moment had been orchestrated, the perfect scene set to humiliate me in front of everyone. "Well?" Amanda pressed, arms folded. "We're waiting." I exhaled softly, then reached for my phone, my movements deliberate. The silence deepened as I scrolled through my contacts and tapped a number. Amanda's smirk faltered as I placed the call on speaker. "Diana," came the smooth, familiar voice of James Peterson. "I wasn't expecting a call from you on Christmas Day." "I'm sorry to interrupt your holiday, James," I said, my voice even. "But we have an interesting situation here. My sister-in-law seems to believe that my marriage to Michael doesn't legally exist." A beat of silence. Then a low chuckle. "Ah, so they finally made their move." Margaret's smile stiffened. Amanda's smugness evaporated. "Who is that?" Amanda snapped. "James Peterson," he replied, his voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "Lead partner at Peterson and Associates. Diana's personal attorney for the last 6 years. And I must say, this is quite the development, though not entirely unexpected." Michael turned to me, his brow furrowed. I kept my focus on Amanda. "James, would you mind confirming something for my sister-in-law?" I asked. "She insists there's no legal record of my marriage to Michael." "Certainly." The rustling of papers carried through the speaker. "Marriage certificate filed and registered June 15th, 5 years ago. Joint accounts, property agreements, all documented and legally binding. Would you like me to email copies to the family?" Amanda had gone ghostly pale. Across the table, Margaret gripped her water glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. "That's impossible," Amanda sputtered. "We checked the records. There was nothing." "Ah, yes," James mused. "Your little courthouse search last month. Interesting timing. We were, of course, notified. And you see, when there are concerns about tampering, we take precautions." Understanding dawned in Michael's eyes. He now realized why I'd insisted on handling our legal matters myself, why I'd been so meticulous. Margaret's voice, usually so controlled, wavered. "Diana, what is the meaning of this?" I met her gaze and smiled, the same cold, polite smile she had given me for years. "It's quite simple, Margaret. I've known all along that you and Amanda were trying to erase my marriage. The misplaced documents, the rumors, the little suggestions to Michael about keeping assets separate just in case." I reached into my bag and placed a sealed envelope on the table. I documented everything. Every attempt, every inquiry, every conveniently lost file. And now that you've finally shown your hand. I nudged the envelope toward her. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation about respect and boundaries." Silence. Amanda stood frozen, her confidence shattered. Margaret eyed the envelope as if it were a snake poised to strike. Michael slid his hand into mine under the table, his grip firm, reassuring. James spoke again, his voice light but edged with something unmistakable. "Oh, and before I go, I've prepared a complete file detailing every instance of interference with Diana and Michael's marriage records. Should anything unfortunate happen to any legal documents in the future, well, let's just say it would raise some very interesting legal questions." I ended the call with a polite, "Merry Christmas, James," before turning back to my stunned audience. "Now," I said, picking up my fork, "shall we continue with dinner? I believe dessert is about to be served." The days after Christmas dinner passed in an eerie quiet. No calls from Margaret. No passive-aggressive texts from Amanda. The family group chat, normally a steady stream of messages, photos, and updates, had gone silent. Even Michael seemed distant, lost in thought as he processed everything that had come to light. It wasn't until 3 nights later, as we sat together in the living room, that he finally voiced the question I'd been expecting. "How long have you known?" His voice was quiet, almost hesitant, about what they were trying to do. I closed my book, setting it aside before turning to face him. "Do you remember, 3 months after our wedding, when the courthouse called to verify our marriage license because the original had gone missing?" He frowned, nodding slowly. "Yeah, they said it was misfiled, right?" "No," I held his gaze. "Margaret convinced a clerk to help her check our records. The original disappeared during that check. If I hadn't already filed copies with James, it would have been gone for good." Michael exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair, a telltale sign of his distress. "Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me?" I asked gently. "Every time I tried to bring up your mother's behavior, you told me I was overreacting, that she just needed time to adjust." He flinched, guilt flickering across his face. "I should have listened. I never thought they'd go that far." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A message from Amanda. "We need to talk. Alone." I showed Michael the screen. His jaw tightened, but I placed a hand over his, reassuring. "It's time to clear the air. All of it." The next afternoon, I met Amanda at a small cafe downtown. She looked different, less polished, almost fragile without her usual armor of designer clothes and meticulously styled hair. She sat clutching her coffee cup like a lifeline, her nails tapping restlessly against the ceramic. "How did you know?" she asked the moment I sat down. "How long have you been collecting evidence?" I stirred my tea, my movements slow, measured. "Since before the wedding. The first time I overheard you and Margaret discussing how to protect the family assets from me, I knew I needed to be careful." "You were spying on us?" Her voice had an edge, but it lacked the bite it once held. "No, Amanda. I was protecting myself. There's a difference." I met her gaze. "The real question is, why? Why spend 5 years trying to invalidate my marriage?" She looked away, shoulders sagging. "Mom was convinced you were after Michael's inheritance. She said we needed a backup plan, a way to prove the marriage wasn't legal if you ever tried to take what wasn't yours. And you never questioned her? Never considered how this would affect your brother?" Her throat bobbed as she swallowed hard. She said she was protecting him. A shaky breath. "But yesterday, I found something in her study." She pulled a folder from her bag and slid it across the table. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Bank statements, letters, legal notices, and then the truth. "She's been embezzling from the family trusts," Amanda whispered. "The money she accused you of chasing. She's been stealing it herself. She needed someone to blame if it was ever discovered." A cold, sharp silence stretched between us as the final pieces fell into place. Margaret's iron grip on the family's finances, her relentless obsession with painting me as a gold digger, the desperate attempts to erase my marriage. It was never about protecting Michael, it was about protecting herself. "Does Michael know?" I asked. Amanda shook her head. "I came to you first. I owe you that much." I studied her face, searching for deception. Instead, I found something unexpected: regret. "Thank you for showing me this," I said finally, "but you understand this can't stay buried." "I know," she murmured. "That's why I brought it to you. Mom, she has to be stopped, and I need to make things right." By the time I got home, my mind was racing. Margaret hadn't just tried to destroy my marriage. She had spent years stealing from her own children while setting me up as the perfect scapegoat. Michael was in his office, lost in paperwork. He looked up as I entered, eyes flicking to the folder in my hands. "There's something you need to see," I said softly, "and it's not going to be easy." For the next hour, we pored over the documents together. I held his hand as the betrayal unfolded before him, watching as anger, hurt, and disbelief flickered across his face. "All this time," he whispered hoarsely, "all this time she was accusing you of being after our money. She was the one stealing it." I squeezed his fingers, grounding him. "I'm so sorry, Michael." He looked up at me, his blue eyes rimmed with red. "No, I'm the one who's sorry. I should have defended you. I should have seen what they were doing. Instead, I let them push you to the outside while my own mother." His voice broke. I cupped his face in my hands, forcing him to meet my gaze. We'll handle this. Together. For the first time in days, he gave me a small, fragile smile. Together, he echoed, gripping my hand like it was the only thing keeping him afloat. As we sat there, surrounded by the remnants of Margaret's deception, I realized this wasn't the victory I had once imagined. It wasn't about proving I was right or about exposing their schemes. This was something deeper, more painful. But perhaps for the first time in years, it was real. The family meeting was set for Saturday morning at our house. Michael insisted on neutral ground, somewhere outside Margaret's domain, where her manipulations held no power. Amanda arrived first, clutching a fresh stack of documents she'd uncovered. Her face was pale, her fingers trembling slightly as she set the papers on the coffee table. We exchanged a brief glance, unspoken understanding passing between us. Today would change everything. Margaret arrived last. She hesitated for the briefest moment on the threshold, her usual confident stride faltering as she took in the sight of all of us waiting. Her mask slipped back into place just as quickly. "What's this about?" she demanded, her voice sharp with forced authority. "Some sort of intervention." Michael stood, his grip tightening on the folder in his hands. He looked pale, but his voice was steady. "Sit down, Mom. We need to talk about the family trust." The color drained from Margaret's face. She opened her mouth, no doubt ready with some excuse. But then Michael laid out the evidence. Bank statements, transfer records, forged signatures, a paper trail of betrayal stretching back years. Margaret tried to interrupt, her voice tight with indignation, but Amanda cut through her protests with a quiet, devastating certainty. "We found everything, Mom. The offshore accounts, the gambling debts, all of it." "You don't understand," Margaret protested, her carefully constructed composure beginning to crack. "I was protecting our family's legacy." Michael's voice broke. "By stealing from us. By trying to destroy my marriage to cover your tracks." Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. I watched as the truth unraveled Margaret's world. Her schemes, her manipulations, all the careful planning, exposed in the harsh, unforgiving light of day. Michael took a breath, steadying himself before delivering the final blow. "We've already spoken with the family lawyer. The trust will be restructured. You'll no longer have access to any accounts." Margaret surged to her feet, her voice rising with desperation. "You can't do this to me. I'm your mother." For the first time, I spoke. "Yes," I said quietly, "you are." Which makes this betrayal even worse. Her eyes darted between us, searching for an ally. But there was no one left to save her. And in that moment, I felt no satisfaction, only sadness. For the years of damage, the relationship she had poisoned, the love she had squandered in pursuit of control. The weeks that followed brought irreversible change. Margaret faced legal consequences, though Michael and Amanda insisted on handling the matter privately to avoid public scandal. The trust was completely restructured, placed under transparent oversight with an equal distribution among the siblings. Amanda, for her part, threw herself into making amends, not just with me, but with everyone her mother had driven her to hurt. One evening, over coffee, she hesitated before speaking, her voice unsteady. "I was a terrible sister to you," she admitted, her fingers twisting around her mug. "I let Mom poison everything. I never once thought for myself." I reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "We can't change the past, Amanda. But we can decide what comes next." She blinked back tears, nodding. Michael focused on rebuilding, both within himself and within the family company. He implemented new financial controls, ensuring no one could ever manipulate the trust again. One night, as we sat on our back porch, he stared out at the darkened sky, deep in thought. "You know what's ironic?" he murmured. "Mom always claimed you were a threat to our family's stability, but you're the one who saved us from her destruction." I leaned my head against his shoulder, watching the stars. Sometimes the people who seem to threaten our world are actually the ones helping us see it more clearly. 6 months after that fateful Christmas dinner, we hosted another family gathering. The energy in the house was different this time, lighter, more genuine. Amanda arrived with her new boyfriend, who looked at her with an affection that made me smile. Michael's younger cousins played in the yard, their laughter drifting through the open windows. As I set the table, carefully placing the same china we had used that Christmas night, I reflected on how much had changed. The marriage certificate Margaret had fought so hard to erase still sat safely in our files. but it no longer felt like a shield I had to wield in defense. Now it was simply what it was always meant to be, a symbol of our commitment. Michael came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "What are you thinking about?" I turned to face him, smiling softly. How sometimes the worst moments lead to the best changes. He nodded, pulling me closer. "We're stronger now, aren't we?" "Yes," I said, "because we chose to be." Looking around at our rebuilt family, I realized something. Victory doesn't always mean winning a battle. Sometimes it means healing the wounds that caused it in the first place. And sometimes the best revenge isn't vengeance at all. It's letting the truth shine so brightly that no one can ever hide in the shadows again.